For 6 decades, Ernest Borgnine kept a tight lid on the nightmare he endured with a co-star who made his life miserable. But now, shocking details are finally spilling out. Violent tempers, ruined scenes, and a coffee-throwing meltdown that left someone with second-degree burns. And as if that weren't enough, the biggest revelation wasn't just about work, it was deeply personal. Today, the truth behind one of Hollywood's most dangerous feuds is finally out in the open. Borgnine's rise to fame was anything but planned. Ernest Borgnine was born in Hamden, Connecticut in 1917. His parents were Italian immigrants who came to the United States in search of the American dream. However, before he had the opportunity to establish memories of the site where he was born, his life took an unexpected turn. It was when he was only 2 years old that his parents divorced, and his mother took him to Italy to be with her. He remained in Carpi, which is close to Modena, for the subsequent 5 years, during which time he spoke only Italian and immersed himself in the culture of the region. Then, in 1923, everything underwent yet another change. His parents reconciled their differences and moved back to the United States. This was not merely a return to one's home, rather, it was a new beginning. The name Camillo was changed to Charles by his father, and the family name was abbreviated from Borgnino to Borgnine. All of these changes were made in an effort to conform to the dominant culture. For little Ernest, this was just the beginning of a lengthy series of changes that would have a significant impact on his destiny. While he was growing up in New Haven, Connecticut, acting was not something that he considered doing. It was not in his nature to fantasize about Hollywood or to surreptitiously enter theaters in order to view films. Instead, he was drawn to the competitive and physical aspects of sports, and he was obsessed with them. His high school yearbook did not contain any references to theater or drama. There was no indication that he would go on to have a famous career. But destiny had other intentions, and it all began with the United States of America, the Navy. Borgnine enrolled in the military in 1935, shortly after graduating from high school, and served for a period of 6 years aboard the United States ship Lamberton. At the end of 1941, he was prepared to move on with his life and was granted an honorable discharge. The bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan, however, occurred only 2 months later, and everything changed. It was impossible for him to do nothing while his country was engaged in a war. The United States Navy re-enlisted him in January 1942. And he was sent to serve on the USS Sylph, which was a patrol yacht that protected the Atlantic coast. He never anticipated the ways in which the conflict would mold him. It helped him become more resilient, established discipline in him, and taught him the significance of camaraderie, all of which were teachings that would later form the basis of his on-screen military roles. He had risen through the ranks to become a gunner's mate first class by the time he was dismissed from the military in 1945. He had also received a number of military awards. In the end, he decided to remain in the Navy for an additional 10 years. It is possible that Hollywood would have never heard of his name if he had. Then, when his mother made a single remark, things were completely different. She told him that he displayed a powerful personality and that he ought to try his hand at acting. It was that one simple idea that shifted the course of his life in a way that he could never have imagined. When I first considered it, acting seemed like an odd decision. He lacked any prior expertise, all of his contacts, and had no idea how to get started. In spite of this, he continued on. After completing his studies at the Randall School of Drama in Hartford, he relocated to Virginia in order to establish himself with the Barter Theater. Not exactly a glamorous beginning to the story. An unusual method of payment was utilized by the theater, which was established during the Great Depression. At the theater, patrons could trade food for tickets. This meant that actors like Borgnine were frequently compensated with vegetables rather than monetary compensation. He was unconcerned about it. Night after night, he would perform in any role that he could get his hands on. If he wasn't performing on stage, you could find him working behind the scenes, painting sets, repairing costumes, and even cleaning the restrooms. In one of his performances, he was required to chase a live chicken across the stage, but the chicken managed to get away and go into the audience, which resulted in a chaotic situation. As a result of people screaming and laughing, the situation became a complete and utter chaos. But it was in that very moment that he picked up a very important skill: the ability to improvise, the ability to roll with the punches, and the ability to turn a tragedy into an entertainment. He also had the opportunity to interact with future stars such as Gregory Peck and Patricia Neal, and he took in as much information as he could take in. But then, his big break came when he was cast in a role in The Glass Menagerie. which was written by Tennessee Williams. He was under the impression that he was terrible. No one in the audience agreed. Due to the fact that the concert was a success, people started paying attention all of a sudden. By 1949, he had triumphed on Broadway, making his debut in Harvey, a play that had been running for a long time and starred the legendary actor James Stewart. However, getting to that point had not been a simple process. Those in charge of casting were perplexed by him since his face was too serious for comedic roles and too expressive for dramatic roles. Nobody had any idea where he belonged. On the other hand, Harvey disproved them. When Borgnine was playing the role of a male nurse, he finally discovered his place in the world by observing Stewart's every action. He went so far as to keep a notebook in which he recorded his observations and analyzed Stewart's delivery of lines, thereby gaining an understanding of the trade in real time. The play was performed for an astounding 1,175 times, which provided him with the stability he required to continue pursuing his goals, and with that, the beginning of his journey through Hollywood had finally arrived. The year 1951 marked the arrival of television, and Ernest Borgnine made his debut in the low-budget science fiction series Captain Video and his Video Rangers. In this series, he portrayed the role of a villain. While it wasn't exactly a prominent position, it did bring him attention. In recognition of his talent, Columbia Pictures cast him in a supporting part in the film The Whistle at Eaton Falls. Although it wasn't much, it was a good beginning. Subsequently, in 1953, he released his debut album titled From Here to Eternity. The fact that he served in the Navy for 10 years made him a natural for roles in the military. Nonetheless, nothing could have adequately prepared him for the character of Sergeant Fatso Judson. In contrast to Borgnine's actual disposition, the role was cruel and nasty, and it was a step in the wrong direction. During one of the most frightening scenes in the movie, Judson was seen using a nightstick to kill Angelo Maggio, who was played by Frank Sinatra. It was unfiltered, disturbing, and difficult to gaze upon. Although Sinatra had some reservations about Borgnine's ability to portray such a scary character, those reservations were quickly dispelled the moment the cameras began rolling. For Borgnine, it was all in. He withdrew from the world for several days in order to enter the appropriate frame of mind. And when it came time to film, he underwent a total transformation. Because of the horrifying nature of his performance, Sinatra did not talk to him off camera for several weeks, and even some members of the crew chose to maintain their distance from him. The part that he played had an impact not just on people around him, but it also lingered with him. He had nightmares about that scenario for a number of months after the shot was completed. The audience took it even more negatively. As a result of their inability to differentiate between the man and the role, some viewers were so troubled that they sent him death threats. He had to pay a steep price for it, but it enabled him to establish himself as a genuine actor. He surprised Hollywood once more, but this time in a completely different way. This occurred just 2 years after the first one. In the film Marty, he portrayed the role of a typical good-natured butcher who was looking for love. He was the complete antithesis of Fatso Judson. It was an unheard-of amount for a movie that would go on to win the award for Best Picture, but the film was shot on a meager budget of $343,000, which was a gamble. However, Marty managed to connect with the audience in a manner that no one anticipated. The award for Best Actor was given to Borgnine at the 1955 Academy Awards. His age of 38 made him one of the oldest performers to ever win an award for a main role in his first film. The fact that he was able to defeat Hollywood heavyweights such as James Dean and Spencer Tracy is even more astounding. During his victory speech, he expressed gratitude to his mother for encouraging him to pursue a career in acting. But the reality was that he came very close to not being cast in the role at all. It was once the intention of director Delbert Mann to cast Rod Steiger, who had previously portrayed Marty in a television adaptation. Borgnine was not even on the list until fate brought them together at a party in Hollywood, which completely altered the course of events. As a result of his ability to captivate the producers, they made the decision to grant him a screen test. Mann subsequently stated that Ernest Borgnine did not act Marty. Rather, he was Marty. This was due to the fact that his portrayal was so natural. That role not only altered his career, but it also altered Hollywood by demonstrating that motion pictures did not require enormous budgets or well-known actors in order to be successful. However, Borgnine never allowed himself to be pigeonholed. His performance as General Worden in the film The Dirty Dozen, which went on to become a cultural phenomenon, took place in 1967 when he was 50 years old. He was adamant on performing all of his own stunts, an example of which was a dangerous leap from a moving train. Because of his incredible stamina, his younger co-stars, such as Lee Marvin and Charles Bronson, were completely blown away. In the film The Wild Bunch, which is considered to be one of the most violent westerns ever made, he once again astonished viewers 2 years later. Dutch Engstrom, the character he played, was a cruel individual who was nevertheless oddly likable. There was one particular incident that left an indelible effect on me. He was grinning like a lunatic while he was shooting down scores of men. That terrifying moment continues to torment him to this day. The voyage that Borgnine was taking into television took an unforeseen turn during this time. The comedy series McHale's Navy, which aired for a total of 4 seasons and established him as a well-known figure, was the catalyst for his breakthrough. He was a laid-back officer who led a misfit crew in his role as Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale, which was a complete departure from the intense characters he was renowned for playing. A significant number of individuals were unaware of the fact that his performance was influenced by his actual life experiences. Due to the fact that he had served in the Navy during World War II, he lent an effortless assurance to the part, even when the show was at its most ridiculous. However, McHale's Navy was not entirely laughable. Borgnine was involved in a catastrophic accident on the set during the 2nd season, which occurred when a pyrotechnic device burst prematurely, causing him to suffer burns on his face and hands. It was necessary to halt production for a period of 3 weeks while he was recuperating. After he had returned, his commitment was more resolute than it had ever been. Also in the same year, he was nominated for an Emmy for his performance in the part. Even outside of Hollywood, the show had an impact that was completely unanticipated. In 1965, a confidential memo stated that the U.S. The fact that Navy had actually spoken with the show's writers demonstrates that Borgnine's military experience still carried weight, even in the comedy genre. The unconventional approach to problem-solving that McHale utilized in McHale's Navy was thought by some officials to have the potential to be effective in real life. What is the end result? The show served as the inspiration for a series of naval training exercises known as Operation McHale. Although the specifics are kept under wraps, the simple fact that a sitcom had an impact on military strategy is almost incomprehensible. Unanticipated developments continued to take place during Borgnine's career in television. He played the part of Dominic Santini in the action-packed series Airwolf, which was centered around a high-tech helicopter in 1984 when he was 67 years old. He was adamant on performing many of his own stunts, despite the fact that he was getting older and refused to slow down. That choice came dangerously close to taking his life. During the filming of a scene in 1985, a helicopter got out of control and crashed a few feet away from where he was standing. He was able to escape with only minor injuries because of his lightning-fast reflexes, which saved him. However, Airwolf was not the final episode in which he surprised the audience. Because of his subsequent significant role, he was exposed to an entirely new generation, this time in the capacity of a superhero. Well, sort of. Let's welcome SpongeBob SquarePants' Mermaid Man to the scene. His grandson, who was completely enamored with the show and incessantly urged him to take part in it, was the individual who initiated the entire situation. This was something that Borgnine casually stated to a Nickelodeon executive while they were attending a charity event in the year 1998. At that very moment, they presented him with a napkin and requested that he read a selected number of lines. As a result of his spontaneous performance, he was immediately cast in the part. Over the course of 13 years, Mermaid Man appeared in 17 episodes, quickly becoming a fan favorite. The makers of the show even made a few oblique references to Borgnine's actual experience in the Navy by incorporating them into the language of the character. Just 2 weeks before he passed away in 2012, he participated in his last recording session. Despite the fact that he was 95 years old, he continued to work, making him one of the oldest voice actors performing in the profession. It is amusing to consider that someone who went on to become such a well-known figure in the world of television initially desired to have no interest in the tiny screen. He was offered the lead role in The Real McCoys in 1956, shortly after he had won the Academy Award for his performance in Marty. He dismissed it with a sneering remark, "Television is a passing fad." Once upon a time, cinema stars considered television to be a lower level of entertainment. However, in 1961, a charity event brought about a change in thinking that completely altered everything. In the hospital, Borgnine met a little kid who was suffering from a grave disease. The boy shared with him that watching his movies brought him joy while he was there. That instant had a profound impact on him. It dawned on him that television was more than simply a source of pleasure. It had the ability to connect with people in ways that cinema could never do. Before he had a change of heart, The Real McCoys had already become a huge success, and Walter Brennan was playing the lead role. The experience of being rejected taught him a valuable lesson, and when McHale's Navy presented itself a few months later, he jumped at the chance to join it. A number of years later, he realized that he had made a mistake regarding television and stated, "I was a fool to think television was beneath me. We are not concerned with the size of the screen. Rather, we are concerned with the size of the audience's heart." The love life of Borgnine was equally as dramatic as the performances that he gave throughout his life, which were many and unforgettable. 5 marriages took place throughout the course of his 95 years of life. Some of them ended in pain, some in scandal, and one of them ended in a lasting devotion. Prior to his rise to stardom, he was married to Rhoda Kemmons, his first wife. In 1949, they tied the knot, and in 1952, they became parents to a girl named Nancy. During the course of nearly a decade, they constructed a life together. But as Borgnine's career flourished, their marriage began to fall apart. It was over by the year 1958. Katy Jurado, a Mexican actress who would go on to become famous for her fiery personality both on and off the film, came next. The year 1959 was the year of their wedding, yet their relationship was anything but tranquil. Their passionate disagreements frequently resulted in public altercations, and their violent clashes became the subject of tabloids. They reached their limit in 1963. Another failed marriage offers yet another opportunity for growth. Then came the one that was the shortest and most notorious of all of them. Borgnine tied the knot with Ethel Merman, a stage legend, in 1964. It appeared to be a Hollywood fairy tale when it was written down. As a matter of fact, it was a catastrophe. In June, they tied the knot and immediately embarked on a honeymoon trip to Japan. However, the trip turned out to be a nightmare rather than a romantic one. Fans flocked to Borgnine wherever they went, leaving Merman with the impression that he was being neglected. On a daily basis, the tension increased. Things had already begun to go awry by the time they reached Tokyo. After some time had passed, witnesses described hearing a heated debate that reverberated throughout the corridors of their hotel. In the heat of the moment, Merman pulled off her ring that was made of diamonds and pearls and threw it into a koi pond. After saying "I do" for the first time, she filed for divorce a little over a month later. To the best of our knowledge, Merman never again mentioned the marriage, at least not verbally. 1978 was the year when she published her memoirs. My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine was the book's title for one of the chapters. Because they were anticipating juicy facts, readers eagerly turned the page. There was nothing but a blank page that they discovered instead. According to Borgnine, it was the most intense, quiet burn he had ever experienced. After some time had passed, he finally said, "That blank page said more to me than anything she could have written ever could. It was like a direct blow to the face." Following the calamity, Borgnine tied the knot with Donna Rancourt in the year 1965. Sharon, Christopher, and Diana were the 3 children that they had from their union. Despite the fact that this marriage lasted longer than his previous ones, it was also terminated in divorce by the year 1972. And then, at long last, he discovered the one. When Borgnine was in Las Vegas for a party in 1972, he was introduced to Tove Trias, a Norwegian businesswoman. He eventually won her over with his unmistakable charisma, despite the fact that she was fully aware of his reputation and initially made a decision to be reluctant. During the year 1973, they tied the knot, and it was the first time in his life that he had genuine stability. He considered Tove to be his partner in every sense. She was more than just his wife. She established a beauty business that was extremely prosperous, and Borgnine became her most ardent supporter. He even joked that he was the oldest living Avon lady in the world, after appearing in her advertisements when she was running her business. Their feelings for one another lasted for almost 40 years, which is longer than all of his prior marriages combined. Over the course of his senior years, Borgnine frequently attributed his continued success to Tove. According to what he claimed in his last interview, which took place just a few weeks before he passed away, "I'm 95 years old and I'm still going strong." He passed away on July 8, 2012, with Tove by his side, holding his hand. I believe that it is because of the love that I have for Tova. After what seemed like an eternity of looking, he had at long last discovered a love that would remain. In the meantime, working on the Poseidon Adventure in 1972 meant that I had the opportunity to share the screen with another Hollywood powerhouse, Shelley Winters. As the cruise liner capsized, their characters, a tough investigator and his courageous wife, tried to survive the ordeal. Behind the scenes, their working relationship was anything but smooth sailing. Despite the fact that their performances were fierce, it was common knowledge that Winters were known to be difficult. In order to have a complete understanding of her characters, she frequently advocated for revisions to the script. She arrived on set one day with a 20-page booklet that detailed the history of her character, and she insisted that lines be rewritten to conform to her vision from the beginning. Borgnine found himself in a difficult situation because the screenwriter was not appreciative of the situation. Later, he stated that working with Winters was stressful, stating that she wanted to control every detail. He blamed her for the exhaustion. The most difficult obstacle was encountered during filming an underwater scene. Winters, who was 51 years old at the time, persisted on performing her own stunts despite worries about her safety. She desired to demonstrate that she was still capable of swimming like a champion. What was supposed to be a short shoot turned out to be a painful affair that lasted for 14 hours. In order for the director to be pleased with the sequence, it had to be filmed 65 times. Despite the fact that the long hours were frustrating for everyone, especially Borgnine, he maintained his professionalism. Later on, he stated that it was one of the most challenging days of his professional life. She was nominated for an Academy Award, which is a testament to Winters' unwavering commitment. In spite of the fact that he experienced his share of difficulties, Borgnine eventually admitted that Winters' instincts were frequently correct. He considered that working with her was both a challenge and a luxury. He regarded her as a force of nature, difficult, unpredictable, but undeniably talented. He said this many years after the picture was released. Ironically, the conflicts that occurred between them behind the scenes only served to heighten the sense of authenticity and tension in their performances. Although Borgnine had worked with a large number of talented performers, Spencer Tracy was the only one who truly terrified him. The experience of being cast in Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955, was one that was both a privilege and a source of tremendous anxiety for him. On July 12, 1954, production of the film began in Lone Pine, California, amid a scorching sun that caused temperatures to rise above 100 degrees. However, Borgnine took little note of the situation since he was preoccupied with the prospect of working with one of the most legendary actors in Hollywood. By the time he was 54 years old, Tracy had already won 2 Academy Awards and was well known for his natural and straightforward approach to acting. At the age of 37, Borgnine was still demonstrating his worth. Throughout every moment that they spent together, he felt the weight of that experience divide. Tracy had a distinctive ability to throw his other actors off balance. He did not simply remember lines, rather he altered them, improvised, and delivered them with such self-assurance that it was impossible to determine what was scripted and what was not. The situation was foreign to Borgnine. One day, while the situation was very stressful, Tracy made a statement that was completely unexpected. The Borgnine freezes. Because the scene was so unfiltered and genuine, the director decided to include it in the final cut. John Sturgis, the director, favored creating long, uninterrupted takes for the filmmaking process. This did not provide any difficulties for someone like Tracy. The situation was a nightmare for Borgnine. On the 17th of August, he made 7 consecutive mistakes with his lines, which occurred during a crucial scene. As Tracy made more and more errors, her displeasure became more and more apparent. Borgnine experienced a diminishing sense of size with each passing second. The tension that was present in the background permeated both performances, giving their roles more depth. Bourne played the role of the thug with a short fuse, while Tracy played the role of John J. McCready, who was silent but unshakable. Even though their scenes were already captivating, the fight scene that took place in the cafe of the town on August 23rd was unparalleled in its intensity. In the film Bad Day at Black Rock, this fight ended up being one of the most memorable parts of the narrative. It was up to Tracy, who was portraying a military veteran with only one weapon, to eliminate Borgnine's character using nothing but her expertise and pinpoint accuracy. In reality, Borgnine was taller than Tracy, towering at 5 feet 9 inches and weighing approximately 210 pounds. Tracy, on the other hand, was substantially lighter at 160 pounds, although being an inch taller at 5 feet 10 inches. Because of the stark contrast between the two, the intensity of the scene was only increased. Getting it right required 14 attempts. When the 7th round rolled around, things became alarmingly real. Borgnine accidentally delivered a powerful punch to Tracy's jaw. There was complete silence on the set. After a brief moment, Tracy immediately shrugged her shoulders and pretended as if nothing had occurred. Borgnine, who was already anxious, felt considerably more tense than he had before. He continued to make mistakes and the pressure continued to increase. Then came a moment that he would never forget. Tracy, who was staring him down, delivered the line, "You're not only wrong, you're wrong at the top of your voice." There was something about the way that he uttered it that made it feel personal, as if he wasn't just speaking to the character but to Borgnine himself. Following the conclusion of the bout, Tracy executed a one-arm judo throw that resulted in Borgnine being thrown onto a table. Because there were no stunt doubles, there were only 2 tired actors who gave it their all. Filming of the final take took place at precisely 4:17 p.m. All of these things, the irritation, the sweat, and the exhaustion, made the scene feel more genuine and authentic. However, in spite of all the stress, that fight led to a transformation in the relationship between them. Suddenly, Tracy had a newfound respect for Borgnine, despite the fact that she had spent the most of the shoot trying to keep him on edge. Not much longer after that, he personally suggested that Borgnine play Marty, 1955, the role that ultimately earned him an Academy Award. Following that, in 1954, Johnny Guitar was released, a project that Borgnine believed would be nothing more than another film. Other than that, he found himself in the heart of one of the most combustible feuds now taking place in Hollywood. Not only were Joan Crawford and Mercedes McCambridge competitors, but they were also co-stars in the same production. When Crawford found out that McCambridge's husband, Fletcher Markle, had been connected with her in the past, it was the beginning of the trouble. She was sufficiently enraged by that particular piece of history. Because of her actions, McCambridge's life became a living hell from that point on. Borgnine was present when Crawford rushed onto the set one day, snatched McCambridge's costumes and hurled them onto the highway. Borgnine observed this incident unfold. They were in danger of being disoriented in the desert of Arizona, so the crew members had to work quickly to collect them. While Borgnine made an effort to concentrate on his task, the animosity that existed between the 2 women made it practically impossible for him to do so. In the same room together, they refused to be in the same room. Due to the fact that their portions had to be shot individually, director Nicholas Ray had to piece everything together in post-production. That was already a source of frustration, but on September 3rd, things took a turn that was even more erratic than before. Crawford and McCambridge absolutely lost control of the situation during a particularly intense section of the conversation. After some time, the ranting turned into a full-on physical altercation. In order to separate them, Borgnine and Sterling Hayden, who also starred in the film, had to intervene. It was complete and utter mayhem. In a later statement, Borgnine described the behavior as the most unprofessional he had ever witnessed on a production. In spite of everything that was going on, Crawford never directed her rage against Borgnine. As a matter of fact, she was able to get along with him. However, he saw enough to understand that her rage had no boundaries. She grabbed a cup of hot coffee and hurled it at a young production assistant one day, reacting to a poor take that she had just completed. The unfortunate individual sustained second-degree burns. The moment was one that Borgnine never forgot. In an interview that took place many years later, he stated that Joan was like a ticking time bomb, meaning that you never knew what would set her off. In addition to that, there was the time when he happened to walk in on her yelling at a costume designer by accident. Her eyes were wild, and her voice was quite keen. Borgnine did not utter a single word. Rather, he simply retreated silently from the room before she had the opportunity to aim her anger against him. However, Crawford did not only feel rage. As a tribute to her husband, who was the chief executive officer of Pepsi-Cola, she surprised the cast and crew on the final day of production by presenting them with personalized bottles of Pepsi. It was a method for her to express her appreciation. But even that little act of goodwill was not enough to get rid of the months of anxiety. Prior to her departure, she had one last confrontation with McCambridge, during which she warned her in a manner that was audible to everyone that she would destroy her professional career. After some time had passed, Borgnine reflected on the event with a reaction that was equal parts admiration and incredulity. It was like walking on eggshells while juggling dynamite, he recalled. It was a very challenging experience. Although she was intelligent, she was a really frightening person.